weekend, and you know what time it is. It's time to Let's Be Reasonable, right? This is our show. We do it once. Well, actually, we do shorts during the week, and then we do the top five on the weekend. So the weekend, this is where we tell you about the top five news stories of the week. But before we get into that, I want to tell you what this show is really about. This show is dedicated to the common man and woman that slugs it out both ways, uphill, downhill in this country, in the great states of the United States. All right. So this show is dedicated to you. We know that you don't have time to follow the news, and what you do receive, you're receiving sound bites. We know that you don't have time to follow the politics. And we understand. You think all of these guys are liars to begin with. So why should you believe any of them? Now, you do have some political bents one way or the other. So you believe one side is lying more than the other side, right? So you have a vested poker in the game, right? So you one way or the other. So we know all these different things. And we know that you're getting your media either from the mainstream or what I refer to as the entertainment channels on the cable news. I mean, these guys are really good about raising rage and despair, but they're very, very light on solutions when you really knuckle it down and look at what it is that they're proposing. So we know there's a lot of entertainment out there, but we're interested in giving you the facts, and along with the facts, maybe a little bit of understanding. And you know what? We want to operate in a space where we're doing what's right by ourselves, what's right for us as people, country members. What's right for the American people? That's what I'm trying to say. So that's what we do, folks. This show is dedicated to you, and it's dedicated to providing you with information you need in order to make intelligent decisions. So, that being said, folks, let's jump right into the top five news stories of the week. And of course, coming in the number five spot, we've got to talk about the UAW and the UAW's contract with the Big Three. Hey, a new deal on the table. It is tentative, but it's a 4-year deal. 4-year deal. It's a 25% increase across the board for both salaried employees plus those hourly employees. Temporary employees get a step up in pay. Everybody is singing the praises of this deal. There's some consolidation in there on the corporation side, but if there is consolidation to be made, there's the guaranteed for relocation bonuses in order to move people where they may need to go. So a lot in this deal. Keep in mind, folks, that today unions represent about maybe 4 or 5% of households in the United States. That's down from its peak during the mid 70s, where it represented almost like a third of all US households. So I got to tell you, I'm excited about this deal for union employees. I think that they have been desiring this for quite some time. Just think about it. Over the past 20 years, they reported that over the past 20 years, they've received roughly 23% increase in pay. Folks, if you really think and boil that down, that's about a 1% increase over the past 20 years. That is not keeping pace with inflation. So we did see that they get a COLA adjustment with every raise that they do receive, right? So I got this fly in here who's driving me crazy, but you know, my dogs are out and the door's open. So guess I'm gonna have to deal with it. So anyway, the a 1% increase should be on average about 3, but they're not getting that. They get a COLA adjustment, so that should work out in their favor. We'll see how that goes. But again, all in all, I'm relatively happy with this. I got to tell you, I even heard or saw that Toyota is going to raise their wage for their employees. And you know what? There's a lot of rumbling in that space with those foreign auto workers where the UAW may be snipping on their doorstep in order to get some of their employees unionized as well. I would love to see a time in my lifetime where union households go from 4% today to maybe 10% over the next 10 years and going higher from that point forward. Why do I say that? I'm going to tell you, if you look back, take it back to the 1930s all the way to now. There was a period of time between 1930s to about the early 1980s where we saw GDP growth above 3% annually. We don't see that today. Don't see that today. But I think that part of that reason is because you had employees in that space that were making money, that were creating these ripples in their communities. Guess what? Wherever these dollars found themselves, they expanded communities. So, and as they expanded communities, it created more growth. You don't see that today, but I would love to see it. That's why I'm saying I would love to see them go from 4% to 10% because I know based on the history, it should be a boom for the American people across the board. That's huge. You know what? And we can talk about the Keynesian model from 37 to 1980. We can talk about supply side economics from 1980 to now, and we can talk either way. Look, folks, either way, you can look at the good that came out of both sides, and you can look at the bad. And what I'm proposing that we do, we take the good from both of those situations and we build ourselves a brand new economy. Now, that's not to say that that's going to get us to 3%, right? Because we still need growth. We need to be looking forward in order to get the growth that we need. And that space to me, or that place to me is in space. We got to start turning our attention to, you know what, why destroy your home when there's plenty of rocks out there with nothing on it? We could do harvesting out there and do some other things that will be beneficial, not only to the United States, but beneficial to our home, Earth, right? So there's a lot that can come out of this. But again, I'm happy for union workers. I'm happy for, hey, Fain did a great job. You got to admit, the union president did a great job. Didn't get everything that they were looking for. I'd like to see more on the retirement pension side. And remember, we got away, that's another thing. During the Keynesian model, 37 to really about 1980, we had pension plans that were strong. We got away from pension plans. I mean, really, they had you believing things that just had no ability, had no ability to materialize. You go from a guaranteed pension to a 401k benefit. And that 401k benefit, in theory, has the ability to grow a whole lot faster than the pension. But in reality, did not. So you can look at the bad there and say, maybe we should be thinking about pensions, right? But if we think about pensions, we have to think about the effect that it had on the corporations. So instead of building the pensions the way we did back then, maybe we should redesign them different. Maybe they should be individual pension plans. Maybe that takes a lot of the stress off of the corporation in carrying them forward into the future, making the corporation responsible. If they're responsible on the individual side, maybe we eliminate that issue. I ultimately am saying we need to learn from our past. We got 40 years of supply side economics. There's plenty of bad shit that goes, I'm sorry, bad stuff that went down there, right? And there's plenty of bad stuff like price controls and the rest that you can look at with the Keynesian model from 37 to the early 1980s. We can do better. We can do better. So all in all, I'm going to tell you again, I'm happy for the UAW. I'm glad they were able to get what they are able to get. I anticipate and hope that they are able to get more. But this is a 4-year contract. Let's see how it goes. It's in the process of being ratified right now. We get on the other side of ratification. Boy, then it's up to the corporation and the union to uphold their end of each end of the bargain, right? So we shall see what happens. But again, I'm happy for these union workers, and I really do. I look forward to more union representation in this country going forward. It's good for America. There's no doubt about it. Anybody who tells you otherwise, they're kidding you. And they can dream up all kinds of stuff to say this is bad, but you got to look at the facts on the ground. Anyway, that's the number 5 story. On to the number 4 story, folks. You got to talk about Bidenomics. Personally, hey, it's a great segue from the UAW story to Bidenomics. Is Bidenomics working? Well, couple extra numbers. Let's look at them, right? So on Friday comes to jobs. We created 150,000 jobs during the previous month, right? Now that's down from the previous month where we saw 336,000 jobs created, right? So we know that this economy, given its size and its legacy status, right, it grows, well, we want it to grow somewhere between 150 to 170 each month. We want to really create somewhere between 2 million to maybe like 2.2, 2.3 million jobs every year. We're on pace to do that this year, but we're looking at this number. We're looking at that 150 and we're asking ourselves, is that 150 a product of a slowing economy? Or is that 150 the product of the Fed tightening, right? We want to see over the next few months what happens. If it's because of the Fed, we avoid recession. If it's because the economy is slowing, we will start to see GDP go negative, right? We'll start to see other indicators that say that the economy may be in trouble. So we shall stay tuned. The other number that was released on Friday was the ISM report. That report measures the economy in three major sectors, whether it's manufacturing, right? Whether it is hospitality, and then the other is service. So our economy is based on those three different areas. And when it comes to the hospitality and service, the number, if it's over 50, that's a good number. That says the economy is expanding. Now, when it came to manufacturing, that number is contracting. It is under 50 and has been under 50 for the past year. Now, I will note, remember, the Fed started tightening about a year ago. So is that manufacturing contraction because of the Fed, or is it because of some other internal things that are going wrong in the economy that will point us toward to recession? We shall see as we go on. But let's put it all in a bigger perspective. Remember, over the past month, we were looking at jobs. We were looking at inflation, which is down, right? Ticked down to 4.2%. We looked at GDP, which had ticked up to 4.9% for the month. That was a great number. That's a really good number. So now we're putting all this place. We got 1 month's worth of data that we can point to ourselves and say, that looked pretty good. Now we're looking to build that next month worth of data. And it starts with the jobs numbers. It starts with the IMS picture, which both of those numbers in line, but they require that we do some thinking about what's happening and what is the driver. Is it the Fed, or are there things happening in the economy that we need to be paying closer attention to? We also talked about consumer sentiment and also consumer confidence. Two different readouts. What am I going to do 6 months from now, or what am I going to do tomorrow, right? So that's what sentiment and confidence will provide you. Those numbers for the American people, for the most part, it's a hard time trying to get them to match what's actually the facts on the ground when it comes to those other indicators like jobs and inflation and GDP and the rest. Trying to get those numbers to match the facts on the ground has been the biggest issue that's driving the Biden administration crazy, because they see the facts and the people just aren't feeling it yet, right? So maybe that starts to turn around as the Fed, which we think, if the Fed, remember, this is the second month in a row that the Fed decided not to increase the interest rate. They held rates steady. So is it possible that we get a decrease in the Fed fund rate during the month of December, or during the start of the first quarter of 2024? If we do, that, ladies and gentlemen, is a good thing. That is a good thing. That means we're not headed toward recession. That means that, we begin to answer that question. The overall question is Bidenomics working? Well, don't know yet, but we're finding out. We're starting to get some of those answers in place. So that's the number 4 story, folks. Is Bidenomics working? Well, let's see. So far, so good. Let's see what's on the other side of some of these reports that come out during the month of November. All right, folks, on to the number 3 story. We got to talk about Donald Trump and these 14th Amendment cases. Remember last week we talked about how not California, but Colorado had introduced, there's a court case there where the judge said that, hey, Donald Trump, you're not going to be able to dismiss this. We want to hear this. We want to hear this case. So this week they heard the case. The judge said that she's going to render her decision before Thanksgiving. So we'll find out there. Also, there's a case in Minnesota that is before the Minnesota Supreme Court. The Trump team was arguing that it's up to Congress in order to make these decisions. It can't be made by the judicial system, of which, if anybody has read the 14th Amendment, well, there's some ambiguity as to who makes that decision. And remember, the decision is if it's not the fact that you've been found guilty of insurrection. If it is the case that you are an insurrectionist, if you participated in insurrectionist activities, you can be excluded from the ballot. There was a case in New Mexico where a gentleman who was a county commissioner has been excluded from the ballot. He's trying to appeal it. I think he appealed it to the state Supreme Court, and they decided they didn't want to hear it. So I do believe he's going to try to appeal it to the Supreme Court, but it has to make its way through the appellate process, the circuit court process, in order to get there. And the question is whether or not the Supreme Court hears that case. This is going to be the same thing. So you got a case in Colorado, you got a case in Minnesota, you got cases in Florida, you got cases over in Pennsylvania. These cases are starting to be heard by these judges. And I got to tell you, these judges don't want to be making this decision. They really don't. But these cases are before them, and they're going to render a decision. And if there's no doubt that this ends up in the lap of the Supreme Court. And I got to tell you, now listen, this Supreme Court that is there, remember, a year ago, they said that Dobbs and Roe v. Wade were handled incorrectly. It was right for these decisions to be made by the states, right? So it would be interesting to see them do an about face and say, now we need uniformity, right? It'd be rare, and it would be kind of a head knocker for them to say that now we need uniformity. They should say, if they follow the same logic, that these should be turned over to the states and for the states to make these decisions. Now, we shall see what happens. But we probably see that the Supreme Court starts to get these writs, right, in order to hear this case, probably by the end of the year, probably the first quarter of next year. When do they make the decision? It probably happens sometime during the first quarter of next year if they decide to hear these cases. If they don't decide to hear these cases, and you have these judges who say, you know what, he can't be put on the ballot, that does not bode well for Donald Trump. That means in places like Pennsylvania, in Colorado, in Florida, in the state of Minnesota, he could be off the ballot. And it's hard. It's very hard to get to 270 if you can't get votes out of these, or electoral votes out of these states. So again, Donald Trump could be in trouble, but we will have to stay tuned and see what happens. I can guarantee you this one is going to get wild. It's going to get crazy because me personally, I got to tell you, I'm being reasonable. I have a stake in the game in saying that I think the Supreme Court is going to do something uncharacteristic. And they're going to say that there needs to be some uniformity, and they're going to say something like only the House of Representatives and Congress can make the decision to remove a person from office, which is going to be weird. Okay, it's not going to match, but I think that's what they're going to say. Or they may say something like, well, it's up to the American people to make the decision. They have to do that at the ballot box. Well, okay, so anyway, on to the number 2 story. And of course, in the number 2 spot, we got to talk about Speaker Mike Johnson. Of course, this week he delivered a spending bill for Israel to the House floor. It was voted on and approved by mainly Republicans, and there were a few Democrats that jumped on board. But the gist of it is that they're asking for, I guess they're going to give Israel $14.9 billion. Right, that's in their aid package, but the offset is they want to take that 14.9 out of the IRS budget, right? And of course, CBO came out and said that if you did that, then you're probably increasing the debt by I think it was like 12 billion over a period of 10 years or something like that. So, okay, so what's the bottom line on this? All right, so there's two things you need to be looking at. It's an offset, right? So they're getting it from the IRS, but the offset is creating a deficit. Now, remember, these are the same individuals, Republicans, that believe in cutting taxes and cutting spending, and of course, cutting debt, right? So, but this doesn't cut debt. Okay, so they're not going to get their way. Now, and also, you're going to see the same thing play out when it comes to aid to Ukraine. So remember, they decoupled the two bills because Biden wanted a bill that funded both Ukraine and Israel. Ukraine will probably have an attachment to money for the border, right? So, and of course, that will be deficit spending as well. And keep in mind, what's the difference between debt and deficit? So, a deficit is when, let's say, the United States economy, the government needs $9 trillion in order to run, right? But they only bring in about $7.6 trillion, right? So everything over 7.6 to 9 is that needs to be funded will be funded through deficit spending. Now, that deficit is an annual deficit. And of course, if they can't pay off that deficit that year, then that deficit goes to the overall national debt. So that's how that works. So the Republicans on the quest, remember, we had few people on the floor talking about reducing debt and deficits. But here we go. In order to fund Ukraine and in order to fund Israel, we need to go into debt in order to do it. So, I mean, I don't know where this ends. And I guess I got to tell you, I mean, this is already supposedly dead on arrival when it arrives to the Senate. But the Senate has some interesting, well, they find themselves betwixt. They don't know what they should do. I mean, they say it's dead on arrival, but if you want to provide aid and assistance to the Ukrainians and to Israel, then you need to jump on this package and get it voted on and get it down the road. Now, if you want to play hardball, remember there's a CR coming up in about 2 weeks that they need to get an answer from. You could attach this to the CR. And you want a straight CR that includes funding for Israel and for the Ukrainians, and just have it there, and let's have the fight, right? So, but the question is, do the Ukrainians and the Israelis need this assistance right away? It's imperative. If it is right away, then we need to jump on it right away and get it done. But if you're going to hang this out over the CR, then that means well, I mean, that could signal a shutdown, because there will be a question there. There's a question created, because if Republicans want the CR done, then it means that they need to drop the demand when it comes to Israel and the IRS and Ukraine and border security. So we'll see exactly how it plays out. I mean, I got to tell you, on the Democrat side, you guys keep losing crucial elections. You find yourself in a situation because, on those crucial census years, I mean, for the past 30 years, you've been on the receiving end of Republicans doing the maps, right? So that's why you got these gerrymandered districts that, have more Democrats in one district. The rest of the state belongs to the Republicans. I mean, that's how you end up in these places where you have to make these tough decisions. You really need to be about doing this right and making sure that you have some census wins, pick up some seats that you can pick up during the census years. Makes your sledding just a little bit easier. But back to Mike Johnson. We knew this was going to play out this way. We'll just have to see how it ends on the other side. I got to think that this probably gets built into the CR. So when the Senate says dead on arrival, it's probably going to be in the CR, and we'll push it back to the House in order to make some decisions. If Mike Johnson decides that he thinks that this CR is more important, he's going to have to probably incorporate some Democrat support, right? And if he does that, I told you earlier, that doesn't bode well for Mike Johnson. I think he probably ends up getting the boot out of the speakership probably during the month of December. But let's just kind of see how this plays out. There's probably a million different ways this could go, but those are the main two. And remember, I mean, there is a way. I gotta make sure this. Remember, there's already a CR in place with money there. The Congress isn't afraid of deficits, right? So it's quite possible. And I got to look that up just to be certain. But I think you could fund both Ukraine and Israel without needing to go through Congress right now anyway, because the budget has already been approved for the year. You could fund it out of there. That could be a problem. I got to make sure that that's the case. I think it is the case. I'll just have to kind of make sure that I'm right on that. So anyway, the number 2 story, will they get the funding or will they not? Who knows, right? So we had in the number 5 spot, we talked about the UAW. In the number 4 spot, we talked about the Bidenomics, whether or not it's working. We still don't know, but some information allows us to think that it hasn't blown up anything yet, so we must be in pretty good shape. In the number 3 story, we talked about Trump and the 14th Amendment cases that are popping up all across the country. The number 2 case, of course, the number 2 story is about Mike Johnson, the speaker, and aid to both Ukraine and to Israel. That's going to get testy, so we'll see how that turns out. And of course, in the number 1 slot tonight, I got to tell you, we're going to end with. This is a tough one for me. I mean, but there's a number of stories we could have ended with number 1, but we got to talk about Israel and Hamas. And I got to tell you, this story makes me queasy for a number of reasons, right? I believe that Israel has a right to respond. Hamas killed 1,400 of their civilian citizens, right? They deserve a right to respond. Now, do you go through 15,000, 20,000, 30,000 Gazans or Palestinians in order to root out Hamas? I'm not sure that that's the proper way to go. And it's causing all kinds of issues here in the United States. Remember, the United States is already a powder keg. I think the time that Trump spent in office, he aroused some less than congenial spirits that, and well, a lot of these people wish to, in order to get their point across, they're willing to do harm. And that's not how we do things in this country. Or at least that's not how we should do things in this country. I think it was at Dartmouth University. They had 3 different professors. I think there was 2 Arabs and 1 is Israeli. They were how to reach a consensus on the conflict over in the Middle East. That's what we should be doing on college campuses. We should be talking about different things. It's okay to support the Palestinian people. Note, I said Palestinian people, not Hamas. Okay, you support the Palestinian people and their right to self-determination, right? And it's okay to support Israel. It's okay. Plus, they're an ally to the United States, and we can talk about the accords going all the way back to the 1920s, how the Israelis ended up there. I mean, we can have spirited discussions, but at the end of the day, we're no closer today to a solution than we were 100 years ago. So that means that we're not really we're not doing our job. I mean, something is wrong here. And Bibi Netanyahu, I mean, for this guy is the proverbial candidate for the right, when it comes to running for office and running to be the prime minister of Israel. He's always there, right? But along with him, he comes with I think, some bad decision making, and some I would say probably some. I think in a lot of respects, some of the things that he does makes the situation worse. I mean, like the settlements, the illegal settlements, right? So stuff like that. I mean, you look at it and say, man, that's not good. And then you look at, people will call it occupation or apartheid or whatever it is. But, Israel has their finger on the pulse and on the scale when Gazans or Palestinians um, are moving around. There's so many checkpoints and so many different things. I get it, why it's an issue or why they have them, but it doesn't look good. And again, this region has been, I mean, I said 100 years, but really it's been 200 years. That place, 200, it's been 2,000 years. That place is a zoo. It's just a zoo. And really, the other player that we really haven't heard a whole lot from, and who I believe is the strongest player in the region, is the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, MBS. We haven't heard two two things from him. I mean, look, they were on the verge of an historic deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And then this happens. I think it behooves MBS to get Arab nations together, form an Arab nation coalition, and help root out Hamas. I mean, that's the kind of coalition that needs. And you know what? Work with the Israelis in order to do this. Again, he's probably the strongest personality in the region. Bibi Netanyahu, probably second, right? But Bibi, he's not going to be there long. There'll be somebody else. But guess what? If Bibi's young enough or whatever, if he's, even if he's going to run again. Okay, so he'll be back, right? So, but MBS is probably the strongest personality in the region. He needs to be working with Arab states in order to help Israel come up with a solution to this issue. And I don't know what that solution really looks like. And you know what? I got a couple friends who are Israeli and also Arab. I thought about having them come on and just discussing it because you know what kind of solutions are there? I know I'm going to hear everybody's complaint, but what kind of solutions can we reach in this region so that we don't have to keep coming back over here and doing the same thing? And a lot of the Israeli treasure that they're throwing at this situation is really U.S. treasure because it's U.S. aid that makes the Iron Dome happen. It's U.S. aid in many respects that makes a lot of the military apparatus over there run. And right now we got two Air Force, or not Air Force, we got two naval carrier fleets over there in the region. And they're swatting down missiles from Yemen and other Iranian-backed proxy groups and the rest, right? So we got a lot of treasure involved in that area. But at the end of the day, the solutions, they just look horrible right now. They look horrible because it means that, I don't know what the magic number will be. Will it be 25 or 30,000 Palestinians that end up suffering because Hamas wishes to use them as human shields? And where are the hostages? We're no closer to these hostages today than we were when this took place and we started before they went in, before the Israelis went in. put boots on the ground, right? So, I just don't know how this situation ends up. Pray for everybody in the region over there because it's just, you know, it's horrible. I don't know. I mean, we could talk about the religion, but we could do that on another broadcast, right? But at the end of the day, I mean, got to get something done over there because at some point, I mean, aren't we all a little fatigued about what happens over there? And aren't we fatigued as to how it plays out in American society? Right? I mean, you had uh, uh was it a little Arab kid over in Chicago that gets stabbed to death? A kid, 6 years old. Not cool. And then you have, people trying to bomb U.S. or Israeli synagogues, and everybody's on edge over here, all because of that region. I mean, in most cases, people leave their home country in order to escape a lot of that conflict, to come here to the United States to live in relatively that peaceful environment. But the environment here in the United States is becoming less peaceful because of people like Donald Trump, to start with, and because of these hostilities, right? I mean, Arab people don't want to be near Jewish people. It's good. I mean, I saw something on the news the other day. I watch a lot of MSNBC, right? I'll be honest and tell you that right now. But they had I think he was a rabbi, and he was on, and some young Arabs in a car pulled up and asked him if this was his synagogue or whatever, and he said yes. And he's the two kids that were in the car say, "Hey, we support you. We want you to know that we do support you." We need more of that support in this country, and that support needs to yield better solutions. If it's a two-state solution, man, let's get it done. I hope I speak for everybody in this particular case. Aren't you tired of dumping treasure over there the way that we do and getting nothing for it in return? And I say the same thing about U.S. Giving money to U.S. corporations too. I mean, we should be getting, if you're going to use tax dollars, U.S. tax dollars, we should be getting something back for that. But all we get out of the Middle East is a headache. So, I mean, we got to do something better. And there must be a better solution. So, all right, folks, that's the show for tonight. Look, I could have talked about Trump and his kids and New York and the rest of it, but I'm gonna let that story percolate, and we'll get to that next week because I'm pretty sure by next week that's going to be really entertaining. So we'll see. And there's a few other stories that we have talked about tonight, but those are our top five. Those are our top five this week. Hope you enjoyed the program. Look forward to the top five next week. And remember, we do shorts during the week, so you may see some of those. I'd like to do a short a day, and I probably could, but I like to do a short a day. That way you kind of can get a feel for what it is that we're thinking about with regard to our top stories and the rest. Well, there's a lot of information that comes out during the week that doesn't make its way through the vetting process to the top five news stories of the week. So anyway, folks, like I said, hope you enjoy this show. Hope you become a member, like, and subscribe. Tell your friends about us. Tell all new peeps that there's a show out there for them and that we're interested in this isn't really about entertainment. This is about information. Maybe I'm entertaining or maybe I'm not. I don't know. You decide. But anyway, like the show, subscribe to the show, tell your friends. Let's build a network. Hope you enjoy your weekend. See you next week.